Hello, BookTube. Recently, it's been all quiet on the bookish front in the great book wars of the OGBG, the Old Geezers book group. A number of people have made videos. Jason Harrigan, Biographies and Bookland, Sean D. Standfast. People have made videos saying, I don't mean this to be a continuation of hostilities. No, no, this is off to one side. And I say the same thing. I have a book haul today, but it's not meant to continue hostilities at all. Merely training exercises, merely internal security. Never you mind. Pay no attention. I went to the Brattle bookshop first thing this morning. It's a great used bookstore. Those of you who haven't been here on this channel listening to me yak about it for 4 years, those of you who haven't been to Boston, been here yourself to go to see it. It's a great used bookstore full of books just crammed from floor to rafters with books all reasonably priced, all kinds of subjects, and with a high turnover rate. There's a buying table right inside the door, and it's always busy, always different, from hour to hour, much less day to day. And on top of all that, there's also a sale lot next door. Thousands more books for $1, $3, and $5. So, and not junk either. A lot of the stuff that's out there is not junk, or if it is junk, if it's falling apart, it's because it's been handled so many times. But it wasn't junk when the Brattle put it out there. And as a result, it's a book hunter's paradise, because you're never going to be out of a lot of money unless you go to the third floor. Third floor of the Brattle is where the antique and collectible books are, and those can get pricey. I almost never go up to the third floor. One of you could probably find it faster than I could. I filmed a video once on the third floor of the Brattle. Just because I was there and I wanted to film a video and it had to be someplace quiet. But that was a long time ago, and I didn't even look at the books when I was up there. I merely chatted with the owner and his wife. I didn't. That's where the offices are as well. I didn't even shop up there. I would never dream of doing that. But from the sale lot, I found a great deal of stuff, and I want to go through that with you. And we will see some Brattle themes come out here. I've mentioned a few of them, right? The main one being you cannot coerce the karma of the sale carts. These things, if they follow their own rules. If you go there looking for something, I've been with people, I've brought people there and made this mistake. They say, the whole way there, they say, well, I know what I'm going to look for. I'm not even going to bother with the store. I'm going to find a copy of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone out in the sale lot. And I say, no, you're not. And if you keep it up like that, you're not going to find anything you want. You have to be open to the karma of the carts. Just be open to it. And if that happens, you will often find that themes will repeat from day to day, that suddenly the carts will offer you something that you weren't thinking about, but that you actually do want. And a lot of that happened today, so we'll be hitting some familiar themes. And the first one, right out of the gate, is the theme that we just saw the other day. It might have been Friday. Where I found a great old World War II novel, Away All Boats. Just fantastic, something that belongs on the same shelf with The Cruel Sea or Das Boot. And at first I thought, well, you never know what book is going to be the start of one of those karmic trails. So at first I thought, well, maybe there'll be other World War II fiction. It's quite a bit of really first-rate World War II fiction that is no longer in print. Not all of it caught on, even though a lot of it is really good. But today I'm thinking it might be a different kind of strand than that. Still fiction, but not World War II nautical fiction, just nautical fiction, just in general. Because today I also found an old, I think this was a book club edition, with a dust jacket, a great dust jacket, of a great nautical novel. It's just not World War II. I found a copy of Nordoff Hall's Mutiny on the Bounty, and I was overjoyed to do it. Once upon a time, I had a green trade paperback of all three of the Nordoff Hall Bounty books. Pitcairn Island is one of them, and then I'm having trouble remembering the third one. Men Against the Sea. Once upon a time, I had a trade paperback of those three all in one volume. And, you know, it's the way of it. It's not right. It's not nice to Nordoff Hall, whose life story is fascinating enough on its own to merit a historical novel. The story of how they met and the adventures that they had and the friendship that developed between them is worth immortalizing in fiction. One of you should let me know if that ever has actually happened. I've never read a novel about them. I don't think I've ever read a biography about them either, and it's incredible. They are absolutely first rate when it comes to nautical fiction, when it comes to this sort of thing. And, you know, it's a little bit shameful to them to admit it, but that trade paperback that I had, what BookTube refers to as a bind-up, that omnibus that I had, I only ever reread Mutiny on the Bounty. I only ever did. That's terrible, but it was true. It is an absolutely crackerjack book, which explains why it was 100 times more successful than Men Against the Sea or Pitcairn Island. I think it's fantastic. I don't have that trade paperback anymore, nor do I have anything else. So I saw this, I thought, okay, perfect. Perfect. I haven't read Mutiny on the Bounty in forever. And I've read it a few times. It's a good book. It's worth rereading. And it goes on the same shelf as Away All Boats or The Cruel Sea. Nicholas Montserrat actually wrote a few things. And the only one was the novel. The Cruel Sea was a novel that was terrific nautical fiction. But there was a big World War II book called Delilah that was really good. Das Boot is fantastic. And Nicholas Montserrat also wrote a couple of shorter works that really are immortal. HMS Marlborough Will Enter Port, The Ship That Died of Shame. Oh my, these are just fantastic. But nothing really touches The Cruel Sea. And now I have the beginnings of a nautical fiction shelf. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket to the nautical bookcase that Mark Richardson has. You should see it. Oh my God. His nautical fiction and nonfiction, they were the parts of the library that he had at the old farmhouse that most strongly tempted me to larceny. And it was the gun up on the mantelpiece that most strongly disinclined me to larceny. So that was a great find right there. A beautiful old hardcover of Mutiny on the Bounty. And then this next one was inspired by some reading that I just did recently. We saw a new translation of Beowulf on this channel. I hauled and got in the mail a new translation of Beowulf that just came out this month. That starts off with the word bro, and the description of which made it sound just, well, several of you reduced the description to just an SJW Beowulf translation. And at first I thought, well, yeah, that is what it sounds like, but I didn't want to sell it short, so I gave it a lot of attention, and that caused me to pull out a lot of other Beowulfs that I have. I have a lot of translations of Beowulf. In the end, I wrote a review of that translation of Beowulf, and in the end, there were things that I very much liked about it. But it had Beowulf on my mind, and of course the karma of the Brattle sale cards knows what is on your mind. So I found this, Beowulf, translated by John Earl. And this is called A Lifetime Library. I have no idea what that is. This is Sweetwater Press, A Lifetime Library, a very pretty thing. Appropriately somber. And interesting enough, it's in prose. It's not in verse. That's fascinating to me. It doesn't excite the snob in me. I'd like to think that I don't have any literary snobbery anywhere in me, but certainly I don't have literary snobbery when it comes to prose translations of works that were originally in verse. Certainly not. It's a totally legitimate thing to do, and it can be done really, really well. Several of the old Penguin classics that translate Greek and Roman classics in verse into prose are unbelievably good and are wrongly dismissed by purists as saying, well, it was poetry in its original form, it has to be poetry in its translated form, and if it's not, then it doesn't matter what kind of linguistic or metrical skill the translator is bringing to the task, it's just out-of-hand garbage. No. No. So I've never read this. I thought that I'd read almost every English translation of Beowulf, but I'd never read this one. Then this next one is a UK trade paperback. That's not a Brattle theme, that's a Steve theme. I love UK trade paperbacks. Just something about them I just love. This is a Phoenix giant paperback. It's an author that I don't particularly like. Every time I reread one of his books, I just think, to tell you the honest truth, the first thing I think is this was written by an assistant. This was written, you farmed this out, and you were given $50,000 and you gave them $5,000 to do this, and then put your name on it. Now that might be totally unjust, but the author is Paul Johnson. He's written a lot. There are a lot of books. This is one that I haven't read. History of the American People, in a UK trade paperback. This will go on the history shelf. I will read well, I tell myself I will pick a couple of discrete sections and read them just to see what this is like. If I do that and I'm blown away, then I'll just read the whole thing. But I've never been blown away by anything that had Paul Johnson's name on it, so I'm not. And because all these things were incredibly cheap, if I end up not liking the book, I can just sell it back to the Brattle. It's not a big deal. That's the nice thing about the Brattle. One of the many things is that you're not out any kind of money. So, and then one of the features of Brattle trips for me is always biographies. For those of you who are new to the channel, biographies are my favorite kind of book. I love them to distraction, and could happily read them all day long. And I don't, because I'm a working book critic, and you can't read only your favorite books all day long. If you're a working book critic, you have to read everything. But even so, we are here in America, we are approaching the autumn. And high autumn and late autumn is a time when the new release shelves, the new release list, the things that I actually patrol on a professional level, will be absolutely flooded with biographies. So I'm about to get a surfeit of them. But in the meantime, I also have quite a few biographies that I found at the Brattle. Some that I've read before, some that I have not. This first one is something that I have not read before, even though it's a Belknap Press book. This is a paperback of Robert Douglas Fairhurst's book, Becoming Dickens, The Invention of a Novelist. And this is a book about the 1830s. This is a book about Dickens starting out as a novelist, packaging himself, pitching his ideas, reaching an audience, satisfying that audience, learning what that audience likes and doesn't like. I love that kind of thing, but I don't love Dickens. And I'm hoping that the marriage of those two things will, I always hope with books like this, or a new biography or whatever, that it will finally be the thing that shows me the light when it comes to Dickens. I like Dickens, but I don't love him. I don't love him anywhere near as much as his devotees. I know one of those devotees. He actually wrote a book on Dickens that you may know. And I know that he likes this book. I've never read it, though, so I'm going to give it a try, and we will see. It's not a full-dress biography of Dickens. It's not even a personal biography. It's more just a keyhole look at his writing life. Maybe that will help. Maybe that will help me to like him more. And then, same thing with this next one. This next one I've had many times before, and this is also a gamble. It's in rough shape, and it may not be something that I keep. This is by Edith Sitwell, who I tend to like, and this is Fanfare for Elizabeth. A very slim, sort of, she called it a biography of Queen Elizabeth I, but it's really a biographical meditation. Almost everything that she did was that sort of thing. But her meditations can be very, very good, and her use of English is just amazing, usually. So I've read Fanfare for Elizabeth, and I've read, she wrote another great book about the Elizabethan court called The Queens in the Hive, that is fantastic. I don't have that at all. And I don't have this either. Until I saw this, I realized, and of course, I was thinking when I saw this, maybe the karma of the Brattle means that a nice hardcover copy of The Queens in the Hive will show up. Maybe the same person who sold this sold that. I'll be ready. If it does, I'll be ready. But in the meantime, the one thing I noticed about this cover is that it's got some guy's name on the top. I think that he might have done the illustration, but it's so cheeky. But I don't remember. I've read this, I think, once before. It takes no time at all to do, and I don't remember it being a real keeper, but it was $1. It was $1, so I grabbed it. And then another big biography. This one I have read before. I read it when it came out. I wasn't happy with it at all, and you would think that I'd be even less happy about it now, because it's about a racist, sexist U.S. president who's done an absolutely brain-dead, bad job at handling a deadly pandemic. But it's not him. It's Woodrow Wilson. This is A. Scott Berg, who is a really good biographer. And when I heard this book was coming out, I was excited for it. And I didn't like it. It seemed to me to be not only apologetic, corner cutting when it comes to Wilson. You're not allowed to do. You're allowed to do it, but you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't pull punches on a figure. Warts and all is the way to do it. And especially if you're going to do it to an extent that makes it seem deceitful, like Neil Ferguson with Henry Kissinger. But I got rid of it as well. I mean, you know that if you saw my if you remember my library tour of my presidential section, I didn't have this book in there. I do have a Wilson biography, but it's not this one. This is a repulsive figure. Wilson, I mean, not Berg, but the problem, the thing that's always ate at my mind is that this is a really good biographer. So is it possible that I had, a bit of topspin when I went into this and wasn't paying close enough attention to the good things that he was doing? So even though it's about a racist would-be autocrat who bungled a worldwide pandemic, and even though you would think that would make me rather thin-skinned towards enjoying it today, I'm going to give it a try. I will give it another reread in September. And then the last two biographies are also ones that I've had before, and they raise an interesting question. It's a question that I've had often. I believe it's come up once or twice in the famous late-night wine sessions at the old farmhouse with Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads. Part of me is a little melancholy. If you watch his BookTube channel or his Instagram channel, then you know that the old farmhouse is being abandoned. Mark has found in a classic Mark Richardson move, a classic Vermont move. He's found a house that's even older. He's found a house that's even older than the incredibly old house that he was living in, and he's moving lock, stock, and barrel over there. So if the pandemic ever eases up, if Frida and I ever go back up to Vermont, we won't be going to the old farmhouse. We'll be going to an even older house. And I'm sure this subject will come up between us, and if it ever happens, if the gods ever smile on it and we have Jason Harrigan over to that house, the subject will come up again. And that is the subject. I'd be curious to know what you make of it too. The subject of, like, for instance, if we're talking about nonfiction, how many books is too many on one subject? Or do you care? I admit there have been times in my life, including even so recently that they coincided with time that I spent on BookTube, where I thought, no, enough is enough. You don't need 10 biographies of the same person. You don't need 15 books on Jack the Ripper. You don't need a duplication like that. 1 or 2 books is fine. And then the pendulum swings the other way, and I think, no. You don't. There's no limit to here. There's no rule. If you find this person interesting or this subject interesting, why not have 100 books on it if you want to? And that informed these two, because I've had these before, and I believe I got rid of them along those lines by thinking, you don't need all these books on the same person. There are quite a few people in the biography circles that are like that for me, and one of them is Benjamin Franklin. This is The Private Franklin. And this is by Claude-Anne Lopez and Eugenia Herbert. And Claude-Anne Lopez is... she's not a Frenchie, she's a Belgie. to quote from a great movie. I'm not a Frenchie, I'm a Belgie. I hope he knows how to stop that thing. Say your prepositions, that drives me crazy. Anyway, she has an amazing facility for understanding Benjamin Franklin. Anything that she writes about him, lectures that she used to give on him, anything like that, papers, they're all fantastic. And he is despite the fact that there are 80 million books on him, that's what originally made me hesitate just a second with this thing, is that I have a whole shelf of Franklin books. And I've had this before too, but I had a trade paperback that fell apart, the spine cracked wide open on me. And I just told myself the Brattle will provide, sooner or later you will see another copy, and I did. So I grabbed it. But I have wrestled a little with that. Do I have too many books on Franklin? But I don't think so. I have no one to justify this to except myself. And I like reading about Franklin. I think he's fascinating. Although the subject of The Private Franklin, this book is about Franklin, the family man. And that's tough. Not only did he have a very public split with his son, there have been whole books written about that split, about one on the side of American independence, one on the side of the British Empire. But he was also... I mean, if you've read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, you know that he left his family. He left his parents and his brothers and whatnot early, without a gun to his head. He did it because he wanted to seek out opportunity, is how he put it. But also, there were plenty of people who wanted to seek out opportunity and didn't leave their families and go to another city, which was a huge deal at the time. But it's not just that. He was also terrible to his daughter. He was terrible to his wife, Deborah, for almost the whole of their life together. Just rude, clipped, dismissive, condescending. Just doesn't. One of the horrible little pieces of dirty laundry about Benjamin Franklin is, although he loved to be portrayed as a kind of kindly old sage, he was very happy with marble treatments like this. he wasn't all that nice. And this book handles that well. It doesn't try to sugarcoat his deficiencies, his personal deficiencies. It's really good on his brilliance, but it's also good on that as well. And I'm just going to put it with my other Benjamin Franklin books. I'll reread a bit of it. But I went back and forth on it because there are some historical figures that I just find fascinating. And I tend to read any biography that comes out about them, and I tend to keep a lot of them. Same thing is true of this one, and this is someone I hate. I don't hate Franklin. I find him fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But this next figure I find fascinating, but I hate him. He's one of those figures in history that I hate, and it's Richard III. And this is Paul Murray Kendall, who was for a long time the poobah of this period. Wrote a whole bunch of books. They were all well-received, gigantic chunks that everybody referenced over and over again. And that was a long time ago. When did Kendall's Richard III book come out? 1955. Okay, so Richard III's scholarship has moved on enormously since Kendall wrote this book, and also Richard III's skeleton was found. That doesn't help much in studying the man or his time, but it's sort of a marker in the field that, of before and after studies. And yet, I have a lot of books on Richard III. I find him appallingly fascinating. A man who was responsible for, I don't even know how accurately you would count how many kings this one man killed. I myself believe he was directly responsible for the death of his father. I myself believe he was directly responsible for the death of his brother. I myself, of course, believe with most people that he was directly responsible for his brother's heir, his own nephew. And his brother's heir was the older of the two brothers of the princes in the tower. He would have been the first object of the assassins that Richard sent there. So keep in mind, when that older brother was killed by those assassins, even though they then immediately turned to the younger brother was at that moment king. The minute the older boy died, it was, the king is dead, long live the king, and that was his younger brother, who was then immediately killed. So that's three kings right there, and that's not saying anything about anybody else that Richard killed. So I find him fascinating. I've had a rough time of it thanks to Josephine Tay's book, The Daughter of Time, which wants to exonerate him and make him dreamy. I've had a rough time of it over the years with Ricardians who think that he's defensible. He's not. He's a monster. One of history's greatest monsters, in my opinion. And I don't care if he was hunchbacked or not. Wouldn't interest me one way or the other. The speculation that some Tudor-era portraits of him were exaggerating the imbalance in his shoulder and creating a hunched back, that looked dicey to me all along. I don't care one way or another whether he was deformed. I judge by... Well, anyway, this is extremely well written. It's written with a kind of confident, sort of august scholarship that the newer books on Richard III, that tone is not present anymore in most current scholarship, in most current historical biographies. Most current historical biographies have been workshopped and footnoted and conferenced to death. So they don't have any kind of literary panache to them anymore. Usually they don't. Not just British monarchy biographies, but any kind of biography that don't. You look for it. You look for it in vain in a lot of cases. Like, for instance, Jackson's big biography of de Gaulle. I wanted that to have a lot more panache than it did. There was Bew's big biography of Clement Attlee. I wanted that to be a lot better than it was. It was really good. In terms of the raw stuff that a biography does, it was really good. But I'm thinking of, well, if we could get Martine out of the room, I'm thinking of that Margaret Thatcher trilogy, which is not only the final word in scholarship, but is also beautifully written. Beautifully, wittily, smartly, mordantly written. I kind of like that in my big biographies, and you get that with this author. So what if the book is older? It's still a work on its own. You can still read it and enjoy it. That's my defense anyway. That's my rationalization. So there's quite a few biographies that I've already read that are going to go on the ever-expanding biography section. And then there was the find of the day. We'll wrap this up with the find of the day. And it's a find on a subject that has actually occurred on this channel before. Not on any other channel on BookTube, and not on any other channel on YouTube. Not on any other channel anywhere. But on this channel, yes. And that is the Saturday Club. which in its heyday was a Boston club, an informal group of friends who were the giants, the titans of the literary, the philosophical, the scientific, the naturalistic, the medical, the geological, the giants of the thinking of Boston when Boston was the place where the best thinking in the world was happening. The giants of the thinking and the literary and the social and the cultural and the scientific world when Boston was first dubbed the hub of the universe. The Saturday Club was where those men met and ate and drank and shared ideas and inspired each other. The Atlantic Monthly, the original version of the magazine, was born of the Saturday Club, was born of those evenings. And they read each other's work. They proofed each other's work. They were trailblazers in so many ways. And there was a history of the Saturday Club that was done by Edward Waldo Emerson. And a while ago, I hauled this thing, the early years of the Saturday Club. This is from 1855 to 1870. Now, E.W. Emerson also did a second volume of this, taking it to 1920, I believe. And when I hauled this is an ex-library copy, and I just assumed that whoever got rid of this got rid of that as well. When I hauled this on this channel, God knows when it was, I'd be forever finding that video, I thought, the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, I will find Emerson's other volume about the Saturday Club, his other history of the Saturday Club, which is not just a history, it's full of written excerpts, full of biographical excerpts and whatnot. Just an incredible book to have. And today, I did not find that other book. I did not find his second volume. Instead, I found a continuation, a third volume. The Saturday Club, A Century Completed, 1920 to 1956. This is edited by Edward Forbes and John Finley. And it's already got this plastic wrapping on it. And it goes in this series. It takes you all the way down to the 1950s. And that means the only thing I am now missing is Emerson's second volume. The one that goes from 1870 to 1920. That's the one Saturday Club volume that I'm missing, because I'm pretty sure there was no sequel to this one after 1956. The Saturday Club still exists. You can still be a member here in Boston. And I'm pretty sure that no one's done a popular book, a book that was actually published by a real press, might have been printed privately. There's only one other volume, and it's got to appear sooner or later at the Brattle. It has to. But that was my Brattle trip. Lots and lots of good stuff. And a huge block of stuff for my ever-growing biography collection. So we have the Saturday Club, A Century Concludes. Tons of excerpts. All these names on the cover, I know everything there is to know about every one of them. But most of them are completely forgotten. But I know everything there is to know about them. I know where they lived, the names of their wives and daughters and sons, all the stuff that they did and thought. I've read all the original old stuffy life and letter collections. It was an amazing time. It's a time that I've studied in Boston. I've studied all of Boston's history, but that time was amazing. So we have the Saturday Club. Then we have a classic old biography of Richard III. Gladly reread it. An interesting book, look at the private Benjamin Franklin. So not the headline grabber who took credit for American independence. We have A. Scott Berg, a really good biographer. This is his biography of Woodrow Wilson. I'll give it another try in case I didn't like it the first time, but we'll give it another try and see. We have A Fanfare for Elizabeth, a slight historical meditation by Edith Sitwell on Elizabeth I. We have Becoming Dickens, a book that studies how Dickens made himself a literary commodity. That could be my way in to liking him more than I do. Then History of the American People by Paul Johnson. Might have passed on it if it hadn't been a UK trade paperback, but since it is, I didn't. Then a prose translation of Beowulf. I'm still in a Beowulf frame of mind, having just reviewed a new one. And finally, Mutiny on the Bounty, in this great old hardcover with the dust jacket. So that was not a bad Brattle trip at all. I was very, very pleased. I don't know if any of these books will make it into this room or onto that new bookcase that's wide open and waiting for books. We'll see. I will read in and around all of these things in this coming week and see what I think. And see if any of these books cast a spell on me all over again. But anyway, that was my Brattle trip. Tons of fun. No hostility intended, of course. Purely internal exercises. But I'll wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.